It's on. So the first 20 participants online are in the room as well. So, and if nobody wants to answer your question, you just put it on there.
Are you going to do this exercise or is it Patrick?
Whatever you prefer.
I thought you agreed to clear the number of facilitators.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it should probably be.
Yeah. Super.
What does that mean? Can I do it?
Yeah. We just get started. Okay, welcome everybody. Nice to meet you, Mike. Hello. Yes, testing. You can all hear me. Welcome to this workshop on leadership development in the youth program. We're still waiting to see if there's going to be some more people, but otherwise, let's get started. Sorry? Can you hear me? Excellent. So if you can't hear us at any time, just shout, so then we will be more clear. Firstly, before we do anything else, let me introduce myself. My name is Karin Albeck. I'm a member of the World Committee, and I lead WSEC's work on leadership development. We have an initiative ongoing, which I will talk more about later, and that's this workshop is part of that. So that's why we are here, and we also have a fabulous team consisting of Patrick, David, Vemund, who will all be doing bits and pieces of this session. But firstly, just to get started and to get to know you a little bit and for you to get to know each other a little bit, Patrick has prepared a first exercise for us.
This is going to be pretty symbolic of what this afternoon is going to be like, because there won't be that much emphasis on just us delivering things to you. There will be some of that, for sure. But we also hope to make an interactive afternoon, because we believe that not only we have stuff to share with you, but you also have a lot of stuff to share with each other. And so we want to kickstart that process by having you mingle around with 2 questions in mind. Those questions are, what does leadership mean to you? And why is leadership relevant to Scouting? Now, we're assuming that you think it is. So it's not a yes or no question here, as you can see. So why is leadership relevant to Scouting? So what we want you to do is to just walk around, take the opportunity to talk to someone you haven't talked to before, get to know one another a little bit, because we will interact during this afternoon, and we will have more people joining as they come in. So just let them join the mingling. So please stand up. Take the opportunity to get to know someone new. Ask these 2 questions to each other, and get as many answers as possible. So it's not a very long conversation, just fairly brief. And for those of you who are participating online, you can do the same thing. Ask these questions to yourself and post your answers online. Please do make sure you mingle around. Don't get stuck with just one person, but make sure you also talk to others. Okay, you have 1 more minute. 1 more minute.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you please take a seat? Please take a seat. Guys, please take a seat. Guys, can you please take a seat? Please take a seat. Everybody, please just grab a seat. Perfect. It was great to hear the energy in the room. Apparently, you had a lot to say on these two pretty simple questions. And that's a good sign. That's a good sign that we're going to have a very good discussion today. We're not going to debrief this more right now. This was more to get you started and get you thinking about a topic that at least has been engaging us facilitators for quite some while. And we're very interested to get you on this journey and thinking about this topic together with us. You might be asking yourself, so, I mean, why are we doing this workshop? Why are we talking about leadership? Why now? One reason, of course, is that it's an awesome topic to talk about, and it's always fun to talk about leadership. The other reason is that this is, as I was mentioning previously, this is part of the so-called 21st Century Leadership Initiative that is currently ongoing on WSEC World level. And where does this come from? This initiative simply is looking at leadership development in the youth program and how we develop leadership as part of our activities. This came about a couple of years ago, especially from a resolution at the World Scout Conference in Brazil in 2011, asking for WSEC to take a look at our approach to developing leadership. And what we're talking about here is not about developing a new program or creating something or making it up, but rather going out and looking at the normal scouting that we do today, and rather just understanding better how do we really develop leadership as part of our activities. And this is something that our team has set out to do since 2011. So we've been working on it for a couple of years now. And we have a couple of questions which have been guiding our work. And today would be very much about sharing our findings with you, getting your feedback, and we're also hoping for you to build even further on what we have achieved so far. So if we can have the next slide. Just to give a little bit of scope. So this is what our work has been about. Understanding what is leadership, and also what does it mean in a scouting context. So actually defining what is it that we're talking about. Because my guess is that all of us here, we know leadership. We all intuitively know what it's about. But also if we would ask around, I think, about what were your discussions early on in the introduction, I'm guessing that if we have about 50 people in the room, there's probably 75 definitions of what leadership actually means. So that's been a first step to actually define a common language, so to say, for how do we think of leadership in WSEC. And that's something we'd like to share with you today. We've also then looked at, fine, how do we really develop it as part of the youth program? Of course, we all know that we're working with activities and we have the Scout method, etc. But what is it really in those methods, in those activities that develop the skills that we call leadership skills? And finally, when we have that basic stuff in order, the question, of course, comes, why are we talking about this? We're not talking about it only for fun. We're ultimately talking about this topic to see how can we make our youth programs even better. So that's what these last questions are about. So when we finally know sort of where do we want to get, the question becomes, where are we right now? So how can we actually sort of measure or assess where are we now? And finally then, what can we actually do to improve our youth program? And that's been pretty much our work. And that's what we're going to dig into today also. So is it changing? Yes. For the agenda of today, we're going to give firstly a little bit of context to this whole topic of leadership and what we've been doing on this work. Share the model that we have developed over the last couple of years. And then dig further into how do we actually develop it in the program, and also then how to actually assess and improve it. So that's the scope for today. And as said many times before, this is work in progress. This is ongoing work. And what we're heading for is that next summer in Slovenia 2014, there will be the next World Scout Conference, which hopefully will approve this model as a way to think of leadership in WSEC. So that's what we're working towards. So nothing you will see today is 100% final, which also means that it can be changed. So we're really hoping for good input from you, discussions, thoughts on what do you think works, what doesn't work, where should we still improve. And that's pretty much about it. And I think Patrick will now take us through the first piece on introducing the complex topic of what leadership actually is about.
Thanks. First, I'll just mention something that I think you're aware of already, and that's the fact that some of these sessions are being live streamed. People are participating online, hopefully. That has a few consequences. One is that we who speak need to make sure we're standing in this very defined area and not running around out here. Remind me if I forget about that. If you have any questions, do feel free to come up here and ask them. We're not going to force you to do it, but we really do appreciate questions. But if you feel comfortable, please come up here so that the camera can see you. But so we might hopefully get some comments or questions from the people who are participating online. So just keep that in mind. So, we've already started talking about the issue of complexity when it comes to leadership, right? And we all know it's a rather fluffy concept, leadership. What really do we mean? And Karin said if we're 50 people here in the room, there's probably 75 definitions, at least, and how do we talk about leadership in WSEC? I work with leadership training in Sweden, and I think that's complex enough. As long as we're 2 people or more, we need to talk about what is it. So what does that mean when a Swede meets a Dane, or a Swede meets a scout from Hong Kong? It probably adds to the complexity even more. And now we're quite a few people in the room, we're quite a few people in WSEC, and how can we find a commonality in that? And we're actually going to start in the complexity, moving towards commonality. And one area of complexity, of course, is culture, right? And leadership will inevitably be specific to the context where we're active. So leadership in Sweden will probably look different from leadership in Hong Kong. I know for a fact that it's different from leadership even in Denmark, although Denmark is quite close. And so how can we understand and talk about culture in a way that is respectful to all cultures and also makes leadership effective in those different cultures? Because even if I may think that my definition, my Swedish definition of leadership is the best one, that doesn't mean it works when I come to Angola, for example. So leadership is not effective unless it works, right? So I can have my own ideas and my own value judgment about my own definition about it. But one way to think about, and I mean, culture is also a very complex subject matter. And we've just chosen to use one way of understanding culture. And some of you may be familiar with the Dutch guy. My Dutch is terrible. Are there any people from Holland in here? Okay, so then I can try without being too embarrassed. So, Gert Hofstede, I think, it's more or less. He's someone who's done quite a bit of research on culture. How many of you have heard about him? Gert Hofstede? Yeah, a few. Okay. So it's not totally unknown. So he's done some work on culture and come up with 5 different cultural dimensions. We're not going to go a lot into these different ones, explaining them in detail, but just a brief overview. He calls them power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. So he means that culture, any culture, will score somewhere on these different 5 dimensions. Without putting a value judgment on if they're low or high, not saying that it's good or bad, just pointing out that any national culture will score somewhere on these 5 dimensions. And so let's take a practical example here from our own world, the scout world. And I don't know if any of you remember, a few years ago, as part of WSEC's Earth Hour initiative, there were a few videos that were taped of different scouts turning off the lights to celebrate Earth Hour. And one of them was a Danish girl. And the Danish scout uniform is how should I explain it? It doesn't have buttons all the way, but part that way. You will see this girl wearing her patches in a ununiformed way. They're a little here and a little there. Some are a little tilted, some are, the other way. And it's for this woman, it's a way to express her individuality. It kind of defines her as an individual. However, when this video was posted on YouTube and on Facebook, on the WSEC page, it raised quite a few comments. I think that the very first comment was from a scout in Portugal. And so we're still within Europe, right? It's not that far from Denmark to Portugal. But there are quite a few cultural differences between Denmark and Portugal. Not saying that one is better than the other, just different. So from a Portuguese perspective, or at least from this person who posted the first comment, from that person's perspective, this was not really a good way to wear your uniform. This first question commented on the fact that it was disrespectful to the scout uniform. And that was followed by other comments similar to that. And then there was that started a little bit of a debate on this Facebook page with, people taking sides and trying to explain what this was about. Some were quite upset with it, and some were quite upset with the fact that other people were upset about it, etc., etc. So how can we understand this happening with the glasses of cultural dimensions? Well, one way to look at it is to see, okay, so how does Denmark and Portugal differ using this tool of cultural dimensions? Okay, so we can see Denmark being blue here and Portugal being red. That power distance, there's quite a bit of difference. So this means, again, without going into detail, it means that you tend to view authority in different ways. The idea of authority has different meanings. The distance to authority is different. You will also see the individualism versus collectivism, there's quite a bit of difference. In this case, it meant that this girl, for her, it was very important to express her individuality. And she did that through her scout uniform. But if you spend some time in Portugal and with Portuguese scouts, you know they're very sharply dressed. You know, they look great, impeccable. I've had the privilege to do some scouting in Portugal, and I think, wow, they look great. You know. And again, not saying that one is better than the other, but we use our cultural reference system when we look at this. So, the culture is one of the ways that we need to think of how do we look at leadership. And so this will be a theme during the day. We will do this many times, so just might as well get used to it. Turn to two other people. Find a group of three and discuss just briefly what are the implications do you see of cultural differences when it comes to leadership. So what does cultural differences mean to leadership in your mind? Just briefly, just a few minutes, find a group with two other people and talk about that. Experiences, thoughts, reflections. Okay, try to find a way to finish your discussion. Okay. Thank you. Great. Let's see if let's see if we can get one comment, one or a couple comments, reflections. I'm sure you have many examples of this. Anyone want to share something you talked about, just briefly?
Where's the mark? Yeah.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. I'm very nice. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Karim. Thanks for everything. Okay, the big problem for leadership, for example, my name is Sandam, International Commissioner for Madagascar. One of the big problems in Madagascar for leadership is, for example, youth and adults. We cannot say directly, frankly, in adults, hey, you mustn't do this. I'm not in a good point of view like you. We need to change them. It's not a good way how to do this leadership. We need to to be very polite, and even if we are very polite, it doesn't mean we can help. So I think it's an intergenerational problem as well for leadership in my country. I'm not going to be long otherwise, my friends, but thank you very much.
Perfect. That's a great point, because when we talk about culture, it's not only national culture, right? It's also generational cultures. And the national cultures are also changing. It's not a static thing. Any other comments, reflections, examples? Thank you so much for doing the first one. It's so important, the first one, Nobody wants to be first, so kind of waiting for... Oh, perfect, we got a second one. All right, you want to come up? They're really setting the bar here.
Hello, Patrick from Namibia. Namibia is on the southwest of Africa, just sandwiched between Angola and South Africa. But yes, we see in our small group, we realize that leadership, there's a direct correlation between leadership and cultures. And leadership is actually defined or well understood in each community, driven and guided by the norms, what happens within that community. And the question that came up, just to summarize our discussion, was, can one person lead multicultural society? I mean, to answer that one, we said, yes, it's probably possible if we take the lessons learned from the guest speaker, listening, communicating with empathy, and understanding the cultures. So you can never be a leader if you don't listen and understand the culture. That's again, linking diversity to leadership. But thanks very much. I'm on camera. I don't want to panic. Cheers.
Thank you. Great job. 5 minutes of fame. Yeah. No, it was a great point, because I was also sitting there listening to Christine thinking, oh, this is such a great introduction to our subject of leadership. It really ties well into what we're doing, the whole listening perspectives. Perfect. All right. So moving on. So one level of complexity is the cultural dimension, and not only national culture, but also generational culture, and there's also the whole subsets of subcultures, etc., etc. Another level of complexity, or dimension of complexity, is time, right? So what do we know? Because the working group is called 21st Century Leadership, and for this conference, there is a theme about looking ahead, right? What do we know about the future, and how can scouting be better preparing young people for that future? And so what do we really know about the future? We can project things, and we can plan for something to happen, but we can't really know. And I think that a lot of you have seen these type of well, movies before, but we'll just show a couple of minutes just to get your mindset on what is really ahead of us, so that we can again have a short discussion in small groups about how will the future impact our thinking of leadership, and how will leadership be affected by what happens ahead. So we'll play a short video, just a few minutes, hopefully. Okay, I think that you've seen different videos like this before, and the concept is familiar to you. So what I would like you to do again now, just turn to some people next to you and discuss, so how will this impact leadership? How will leadership be different, say in 2020? Or the trends that lie ahead of us, how will that impact leadership, do you think? Okay, it's a huge question. I know it's impossible to answer, but just get some ideas, some reflections in groups of 3. Okay? Let's do it. Okay, try to wrap up your discussion. All right. Let's see if we can. Let's see if we can get one or two comments on this. It's so fantastic to see all the enthusiasm in this room. I love it. Yeah. It's very good for this afternoon. We will do wonders in here. Perfect. I know it's not really fair to give you this task and to kind of get you started and then break it off again. I know. But this will be the flow, so just get used to it. I know. Okay, so anyone want to share some short reflection, comment, thought, experience? Or it's hard to have experiences of the future, but nevertheless. Martin, yes. My fellow Swede. You want to come up here? There you go. Now no one dares to make a comment sitting in the chair, since everyone come up.
Okay. Well, I might be a bit colored off. I need to stand in. Sorry. I might be a bit colored off the keynote speech I was listening to earlier today, addressing business, and we talked a lot about innovation and entrepreneuring, and I think that to be able to meet the challenges of the future, the traditional leadership. With like one or a few people leading big groups, big companies and so on, will kind of pass through history. And we need a more small-scale leadership and people able to enthusiasm other people and find new solutions to the challenges of the future. Those people standing and telling thousands of people what to do will probably not exist in such a great extent in the future. There will be people leading small groups, finding new innovations, being small-scale entrepreneurs more than leading big companies. That was our thought.
Great. Did I hear anyone say patrol system there? Small groups? So yeah. Great. All right. Let's hear one more. Perfect.
We were also discussing several things down in our group, but I think what we found was really interesting was how to navigate in this big global world. That it's, with all these inputs, it's really important to know yourself and know your own values. So be able to inspire other people in terms of the leadership with your own values and this, and with these very many inputs. I think that was the key message in the end from our group.
Thank you very much. Great comment. It really ties well into what we're doing. I saw Karin taking a note here. Oh yeah, perfect. I'll hook on to that later. So, I mean, the main idea so far is that it's extremely complex, right? How are we ever going to find a common core? How are we ever going to talk about leadership that makes sense to everyone? You know, in a relatively uniform, it's pretty difficult, right? And nevertheless, that's what we're trying to do. And we believe that we've come some way in that process, actually. We think we're doing fairly well. And because there is, after all, there is something, in my experience, in scouting that unifies us. And it's sometimes hard to grasp what it is. It's sometimes hard to put words on what that commonality is. You can experience it sometimes. I experienced it in 2011, for example, at the Jamboree in Sweden. I was sitting right here looking back. This was during the cultural festival day at the Jamboree, and there were 40,000 people from all over the world. There were the Israeli, the Palestinians, the Saudis, Americans, from Chile, everywhere within kind of reaching distance, and everyone had a knife, and there were a handful of police officers in the corner of the field, and they were bored because they didn't have anything to do. And everyone are happy, they're cheering, they're dancing. And it's like, how, in what other context would that be possible? And I couldn't think of any. There's something about scouting that makes that possible. And it's hard for us to put the finger on what that is, but it is there, right? And so what we're trying to do is to find that and trying to define and put words on what that is from a leadership perspective. Take it away, Karin.
Thank you. I was wondering if I have to grab the mic from you. So what we've tried to do here is to give you sort of a speed, insight into the mess that we were facing when we started with this work. So really the big question about, is there some fundamentals in common on which we can build a common understanding of leadership in Scouting? Or is it indeed so culturally, generational, time-based that it's not possible? And as Patrick gave away, we believe we're onto something. And what we've done over the, I think now approaching 2.5, 3 years, is work with this topic. And we're going to fast forward through that. We're not going to take you through all that painful 2.5 years, but just to give you the 2-minute version of all that we've done to explore this question. This is just some images and takeaways from a number of different workshops that we have done over the last 2.5 years. So what we've done to address this question is really scanned all available academic research on leadership that is available in the world, looked at other organizations, what do they do on leadership, what's their definition on leadership, and of course, first and foremost, we've gone out and talked to hundreds of scouts and scout leaders, so scanned all of our movement across the 6 regions to understand, is there something in common? What would really our scouts tell us that they see? Is there something that they see as common? So we've done this is from different camps. I think that's from the Moot, different regional conferences, etc. And the result that is emerging after this tour of getting input from people on questions like what you were discussing in the morning or like earlier, like what does leadership mean to you? That kind of questions. After talking to hundreds of people around the globe, we are thinking that we have found the sort of fundamental elements of what makes our leadership style common in the basics. And those findings we'd like to share with you now. And they look something like this. I know this is extremely fancy after 3 years of work. We're very proud. Let me explain it a little bit more. So based on our work, what we have come to as a definition of leadership that we're proposing for leadership, definition of leadership in Scouting, is that it appears you or your scouts tell us that they see leadership as a process of facilitating people towards a common goal. So it's actually a process. It's not about being in a position, about being a leader, being in a position as such, but it's about the process of just moving a group of people towards a common goal. And as such, anybody can do it. This definition doesn't say that you have to be chief commissioner, or you have to be president in your country, or you have to be the patrol leader to be a leader. But it rather talks about a situation in which you take the initiative to move your group towards a common goal. So that's the fundamental understanding of leadership that our scouts globally tell us. And what is this then? These are the three key elements at play when we talk about leadership. So there's three key elements. One, and maybe one of the most important really, is purpose. So to be a leader, to lead, you have to have some direction of where you're heading. Because if you don't, it's very easy that you end up running in circles. And maybe your group will follow you, but you won't get very far, or maybe back to where you started. So it's very important in leadership to have a target, a purpose that you're working towards. Secondly, at play in this dynamic, we have the individual. You can think about it as the individual leader, so to say, or think of it as you. So, for example, in this leadership process, if you're here, you're seeing this situation from here. So there you are, there's your purpose, and then there's all these other people. So this is also something that comes out of the work on leadership. Leadership is something that takes other people. You need to be more than one person to lead, because, again, otherwise, by definition, there's nobody to lead anywhere. It's just you running around, or hopefully in a straight line. So this supposedly simple way of explaining it really, for us, comes down to the three key elements at play when we talk about leadership. And let me give you an example just on how this works. Let's take some very typical activity that we have in scouting. For example, cooking a meal during a scout camp. This is something that all of us have done and our scouts do. In that situation, of course, the purpose for the patrol is to get the food done. Nobody wants to be hungry. Maybe you are the patrol leader, maybe not. But in the patrol, you might be the one to take initiative. Like, now, guys, let's get started with this food. We don't want to starve. So in that case, you are the leader. You're getting the team moving. Okay, so we have this purpose. Let's get there. So you're pointing the direction for the group. That's leadership, based on what our scouts tell us. However, our scouts also tell us that just because you started the process, you were the one who said, okay, let's make the food, doesn't necessarily mean that you are the leader throughout the whole cooking process. Because the leadership position, or whoever sort of leads, may change during the cooking process. Changes depending on the situation. It might be, for example, if I started the process, I said, guys, let's get some food. In that situation, I'm taking the lead. But in the next moment, I realize, well, actually, I don't really know how to cook. So if I do this now, it's probably not going to be a very good meal if I do the instructions. But, maybe Eduard is a super cook. And I know that, so then he just takes charge and he directs the patrol for the cooking. So then he's actually in the lead. So this is also something that comes back from these discussions, that one of the fundamental things about leadership in scouting especially is this thing about this leadership position as such, rotating, depending on who has the best knowledge, who wants to do something, etc. So that's why trying to describe the dynamics that are going on here with these three elements sort of in a circle to try to get this process going. So just to recap on the fundamentals. So what we're saying is that it's not about position as such. It's not that you are the chief commissioner and therefore you are the leader in your association and the only one. It's rather that anybody in the association can be a leader, can take lead in a certain moment. Similarly, it's also not about age. This is what our scouts tell us. In the same way that the scout leader, the scout master or the scouter, is the leader necessarily, but rather sometimes also the scouts take initiative. So the scouts are leaders as well, not necessarily only the adults. And this is feedback from both our scouters and our scouts. So this is something that we seem to agree with. And there's something I've forgotten. Yes, and not necessarily is it fixed to one person, as I said, so it can rotate. Yeah. So this is really the sort of key elements on how we look at leadership. Couple of quick notes on what makes scouting special, what we found, because, I mean, there's nothing scouting specific in these words. Could be any leadership anywhere. But just to recap on what we have found appears to be what makes us special as such. Really one key thing around the purpose is really our values. And I think somebody mentioned already earlier in the discussion that, you know, as the world becomes more globalized, everything becomes more complex, you have to know yourself and your values better. And this is really something where we appear to have a head start, because that's really one of the fundamentals, that we have our values and we also have in our mission a desire to do something good for the society. So that's very particular for us. Similarly, as we already talked about, very special for us is this thing about rotating leadership, what we do in patrols all the time, so that we change roles in the patrol so that people can learn new skills and new ways to do things. And finally, in the facilitation also, we remember that in our mission, we always have a sort of dual purpose. If we're trying to do something, of course, as a task, but also as always, as a sort of separate track, we're also trying to develop our scouts into better people. So it's never only about the task to get done, for example, the food to get cooked, but it's also about how can we develop our scouts to be better people as part of the cooking process. So that's sort of to lift up a couple of key things about what makes scouting leadership special. At this stage, are there any questions on this? Yeah, please.
Thank you so much, Karin. My question is to be the leadership, if we understand exactly what should be the leadership. My question is, like, one person is really want to move, he want to take some initiatives, he got a new idea, problem, age, problem, positions. Okay, I'm lower positions, I want to take initiatives. How? For example, the patrol leader or the chief commissioner will think, what's this young guy? What is this low position? Sorry to say low. To do. I don't know if you understand my point. So I don't know what is your message or what you can say about that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for raising this. I think this is a very important issue, and it's of course a key issue that we're facing. What we also talked about with the cultural differences, etc. I don't necessarily have an answer, but I have a very interesting reflection to make based on what we've seen. And the interesting reflection is that regardless of where we have been in the world, regardless which region, regardless which country, everybody, all our scouts and our scout leaders and our national leaders, everybody says the same thing. So when we have asked people, what do you think leadership is? What do you think leadership is not? Always, everybody agrees that leadership is about listening to people, about collaborating, about respecting each other. And it is not about position or authority or being sort of having a certain hierarchy. And this is regardless of where we are in the world. And therefore I find it quite interesting that on one hand, we all seem to agree that based on the sort of fundamentals of scouting, this is the basis and this is what we agree leadership is about. And then still we run into these kind of issues where it's a question about can we give more space or not. So there is a little bit of a conflict there about what we are on one hand saying and on what we are on the other hand doing. So I think this is something that we need to discuss and explore further. And this is, of course, not to say, as final comment, that necessarily this is going to work the same way everywhere. That's not what we're talking about, because, I mean, we already discussed there are cultural differences. That's not something that's going to go away, and it shouldn't, because we are different, and that the value is in the diversity. So it's rather what we're saying about we agree on the sort of fundamental elements of how to think about this. Then it's a question of how this plays out in your local society, which then depends on the culture, your history of the NSO, etc., etc. But just to bring out that if you really look at scouting as such, this is what our scouts and scouters tell us. That's what leadership is about for them. I would be very interested in hearing your reflections on this. And I think in a true fashion of this workshop, take a couple of minutes with the people around you to discuss and reflect on, does this make sense? Is there something we're missing? Do you agree something should be changed, etc.? Just a couple of minutes to talk to each other. Take 1 minute to wrap up your discussion. Okay, thank you very much. Can you wrap up your discussions? Guys, can you wrap up? We're continuing. Okay. Can you wrap up for continuing the session? Okay, let's move on. Is there anybody who would like to share their thoughts? At the back, please. So any reactions, thoughts on this model?
Yes, I just listened to this model, says a purpose, individual, and a group. And this used to be described as leadership. But to me, this also can be described as management. So what's the difference between management and leadership, especially from the point of view of scouting, if we are using this model? Yeah, because a manager is individual, he can have also a purpose, and so he assign different tasks to a group to finish that one. So I think there should be something missing here. If we describe this as a leadership model for scouting, maybe we should put some the value of scouting or the way of the scout methods behind this simple triangles relationship. Otherwise, to me, it just looks like management. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's a very good observation. I believe Patrick will talk a little bit more about this and develop this further in a few minutes. Before that, any other sort of upfront reactions, please?
Thanks, Karen. Just to add concerning this scheme, I don't know when can be the control or feedback or something like that. So if I'm a good leader, how far I am. Do you understand the point?
Do you mean
Feedback process, yeah.
I think that's a very good one. I would see it as part of probably the interaction between the group and the individual. How exactly that plays out, we're going to get to a little bit deeper. Patrick will take us through that. Because as you have noticed, I mean, this is still on a very high level. And probably you have noticed, this still doesn't talk anything about, so, I mean, based on this, what should our scouts do? How should our scouts behave? What skills should our scouts have? So that's sort of the next level of the discussion. So I suggest we move ahead towards that one directly, because that's the next question that obviously pops up. Like, this is very nice, like leadership in scouting, very non-beautiful slide, but how is this useful for us? And the answer actually is this isn't really alone, because the key question for us, of course, is so how can we actually improve the experience for our scouts? And to get to that, we translated this into, so what are actually the skills that our scouts would need to have in order to be good leaders, to do good leadership? So based on this ones, what are the skills that our scouts should have? And that's what we're going to dig into now.
Yeah, and we all agree, hopefully, that the Scout program, the youth program, develops leadership skills. But it's surprisingly hard to describe how it does that. And when we ask that question, we get many different answers. And it's hard to pinpoint what that process looks like. And so one way to deal with that, one way to tackle the question of how the youth program develops leadership skills is through storytelling. And that's also what we've heard when we've talked about leadership with scouts and scouters, scout leaders, whatever the term is that you use. People start remembering their own youth program, right? And they share stories with us. And that's it makes a lot of sense because that's our experiential reference. And so we're going to look at 3 different stories from people that we have met during these years, and just to get a few glimpses of what comes to mind to these 3 scouts when they think of leadership, and specifically the youth program, and how that has affected their leadership skills. So bear with me just a sec.
My name's Louise and I'm here from St. Helena Island in the South Atlantic Ocean, and I think where Scouts has really helped me with leadership, and the first time I really learned how to delegate was when we were out sailing on the lake, and one of the members of our crew, there were 4 of us aged somewhere between 11 and 13, and one of us was hit by the boom and their head was bleeding and they'd fallen into the water, and having to stop and take stock of the situation to find out how we were going to get this person back in and delegate the different tasks. So we had one person stay on board, we're holding the tiller so that the boat didn't sail away, and we had someone else jump into the water to look after the person who had been injured, and a third help to pull our injured friend back into the boat. And as it's certainly been Scouts has been a wonderful way for me to learn these things, and as a 13-year-old to have to take charge of saving someone's life was really incredible.
Okay, that's a 1. I know the sound is a little low. We'll see if we can do something about that, but that was the maximum. Let's see if this works better.
Whenever you're ready. Hello, my name is Adélie. I'm French, and I've learned that in the leadership, it's really important to communicate, because I did a camp in which one person did everything, and at the end of the camp, we realized that he did everything, and we didn't know what to do because he did everything. So in the last camp I did, we have a problem like that, but we, thanks to our, how do you say, directrice? Thanks to our boss, we managed to talk of it, and it was really a really strong moment, because we talk about our feeling in the team, and the other talk to us and tell what they think about us and our way to be in the team, so that we managed to realize that we can delegate and do the work in team, so that one person don't do everything. So I think it's why it's important to really communicate in a work team.
Okay, that was the second one, and one more. This guy speaks in Portuguese, but it's got subtitles. They might be a little small font, so maybe those of you who are sitting in the back want to just move forward briefly for this one. That might help.
Olá, eu sou Felizardo José Antônio Angelo, sou escuteiro angolano, sou escuteiro da província da Huila. Venho aqui contar-vos um pouquinho da minha história. Aos 15 e aos 16 anos, eu perdi meus pais. Via que a vida não importava mais, via que tudo estava perdido, porque eu tinha que parar de estudar. Me sentia assim que eu tinha que parar de estudar para poder trabalhar com aquela filha. Entrei sem força para poder trabalhar, entrei num grupo de delinquentes, lá fazíamos e desfazíamos. Mas alguém uma vez, um amigo da igreja, fez-me um convite para entrar na associação dos escuteiros. Resisti a primeira vez ao convite, mas depois aceitei o convite e fui lá aprendendo, vivendo aquele método escutista. E aprendi que não basta uma pequena derrota para acharmos que a guerra está perdida. Nós devemos ter consciência que uma derrota deve significar mais força. Então, entrei no escutismo, fomos tendo vários objetivos, vários temas, principalmente sobre liderança. Aprendi que ser líder, principalmente, é saber controlar-se para ser líder, principalmente. Deve-se saber ter o coração. Primeiro devemos liderar a nós próprios, para depois podermos liderar os outros. Então, assim, conseguir me liderar, consigo liderar os meus irmãos, consigo liderar os outros, porque já fui guia de patrulha, já fui guia de unidade, já fui guia de equipa no escotismo. Então, até na minha sociedade, hoje, no meu bairro, no meu trabalho, me admira. E todos esses feitos eu dou graças, em primeiro lugar, a Deus e, em segundo lugar, a todos os dirigentes do meu agrupamento e a todo esse movimento que me acolheu. Muito obrigado.
Okay, so those are three quite short stories of personal experiences of how the youth program has influenced me and my leadership skills and the development of those skills. And we know that we all have those stories. Now, we've captured three of them, but we also know that each and one of you have those stories, and you probably have many of them. They might be not, it might take some reflection and thinking to remember them, but we know that they're there. If you've taken part in the youth program as a scout, you have them. And it's just like Christine was talking about this morning. It took her quite a while to actually realize what it is that she has learned. And reflection is an important part of that process, right? And so what we would like to do now is to, in pairs, pair up with someone, and we want you to do just a little bit of digging to see if you can come up with one of these stories, one thing that happened to you when you were a scout in the youth program. Some of you may have joined us as adults, and if so, think of some other experience you have. But I think that most of you have been scouts as young as well. Younger. And so try to remember something that happened to you, and the more specific that you can be, the better. This one time when we were on a camp out. This one time when this specific thing happened. And share that with that other person. And so if Karin and I are doing it, Karin's job is to help me remember. She can ask questions to kind of help me get a little bit more concrete, or help me to realize, what did I learn from that experience? Now, we're not going to do a very long thing about this, so just 3-4 minutes each, but try to come up with a situation that you think was useful and helpful for you to develop your leadership skills. Okay? It doesn't have to be the moment of truth, but something. Maybe it was an important scout leader that you had that supported you in a way. Maybe it was a situation that you resolved in a specific way. Whatever it is. Okay? So pair up with someone else and share these stories with each other.
I missed the very beginning, but are we planning, or are you planning to address the why? So the beginning of the document where we're saying there is a purpose, individual, citizens, and likewise leadership is needed? Because the why is not, I haven't seen it answered.
We'll get into it. That's part of the purpose.
that, I mean, if I were one of them, I would ask, why is all of that? Just because the conference said leadership? I mean, I think that one of the main discoveries of our discussion was that leadership is the means for creating a better world. So individuals empowered, citizens that are responsible, and then that's why real leadership is needed. If it's not there, I feel it's like a little bit empty.
The introduction question it was, why is leadership relevant? So, yeah, so we started with wasn't it the dynamics or the thing it's good to
Okay, try to wrap up your sharing. All right, I'm very happy. I'm very happy to hear that there are so many good stories of things happening in the youth program that develops leadership. William? Okay, we'll have more chances after, I was going to call it fika. No, after coffee break. To share more, but we want to get to a certain place in the schedule before we break for the coffee. So, but it's really good to hear that there are a lot of these stories, because we know that they are there. You just need to do a little bit of digging and remembering to, oh yeah, when that time, that's right, that's affected me quite a bit, you know. And so, how can we see this from the perspective of this model? And how can we take this model a bit further, like Karin said? We didn't only arrive at this. We've added some more to this. So if we think of these as areas of knowledge, being aware, having knowledge about the purpose. And the purpose of scouting is really to create a better world and to empower young people in that process, right? So we need to know about that. And we need to know about ourselves. Our friend from Angola stressed the point of leading oneself, right? So I need to know about myself. Who am I? What are my values, etc., in order to lead myself, right? But I also have to know about the other people in my group, those that I'm leading in any particular situation, right? And so we believe that in the interaction between these fields, we have a certain skill sets. Now, we've decided to call these 3 skill sets visionary skills, management skills, and people skills. And we believe that all these 3 skill sets are important parts of what makes up leadership skills in a scout or the scout leadership. So we need all those 3 parts in order to call it scout leadership. And we believe that the stories, the different stories that we have, can, in a lot of situations, be related to one of these skill sets. So just quickly explaining them, what we mean by visionary skills is the skill of setting a goal, of deciding a direction, and which obviously I need to know about the purpose of scouting if I'm going to develop that skill. If I don't know about the purpose of scouting, I can't develop that skill. Right? By management skills, we mean, and I know this is difficult because it depends on how we define words, but by management skills, we mean the skill of delegating, of getting this group of people, of organizing things, events, for example. It's one thing that a lot of people bring up. It's an example of scout leadership skill. Well, you're experts at organizing stuff, you know. And to us, a lot of that falls in the management skills. We've decided primarily, or temporarily at least, to call this people skills. That is the skill to interact with other people, to do it in a way that is respectful to them, that involves them, and that is done in a communicative, collaborative manner. And one last thing that we'd like to do before we break for coffee is, if we take these 3 skill sets into consideration, and we think of, or you think of your stories that you just shared with each other, these situations, these concrete situations, and what you learned from them, can you see that they would fall into one of these primary categories? Was it a situation that mainly was about organizing something? You know, maybe it was about delegation. Maybe it was about setting a goal for yourself or for other people, kind of pointing a direction. Or maybe it was something that had to do with negotiating a situation, solving a conflict, getting people to agree or to involve someone. That maybe were a lot of the examples we got earlier had to do with making sure that everyone was involved in the scout work. Maybe someone was left out a little bit, and the situation was to get them back into the group. We heard a lot of those type of stories. Maybe it was something like that. So if you can think of, okay, that was probably a typical management, delegation type of situation. Do you think that's possible? Let's just do a quick hand. Yeah, can you think of, it's probably one of these. How many can? Okay, maybe, so what I would suggest you do is talk to the person that you shared the story with and see if together you can come up with, okay, it was probably this more than this. Now we've run this through really quickly, so I know it's a little tricky, but maybe together you can come up with it. Okay? And when you've done so, I would like you to, presto, to come up here and just make a short, we got pens, just put your initials or something, or an X or whatever, on that specific skill. So we want to see what is the distribution here of these stories. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes? So talk briefly with your neighbor, decide which one of these do you think your story is about, put your mark, and then go back to your seat. Okay? Let's do it.
No, later I won't, because I'm going to be upset. Okay, because I understood that I had to come here to contribute somehow. Yes, this is what you spoke about yesterday, right? Well, I want it, but I have to find the right moment. Because mostly have been the interaction thing and not on. No, and also maybe linking with the guy from Madagascar. But I don't know. I'm not going to be here the second half. So. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Karin, more pens? Oh, we would not do that. Well, either right after all of this. Yeah. Okay, anyone left? Anyone who hasn't or is still waiting to put your mark? Okay, great. Ooh. All right. Thank you for doing this. When you do something like this and when you have a... Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. So, when we thought about this exercise, we had a theory, and it's always interesting to see that theory play out well, which it just did. And I would say that you have just validated our part of our theory, and this is very consistent with what we've heard from Scouts at different events that we've been at. That is that there's quite a what's the word I'm looking for? Focus or on certain of these skill sets. That is, people often refer to as the management skills or the people skills. we don't get a lot of stories about the visionary skills. And that's quite interesting in itself. And I'll just show you 2 quick pictures. We were at the Moot in Canada, for example, asking people, what leadership skills have you learned through scouting? Okay. And you won't be able to see it, especially not from the back, but I'll read it out. The most popular one was planning work. You know, delegating responsibility. Persevere in times of difficulty. You know, this kind of relates to the scout whistles in hard times or whatever. Knowing his or her strengths and weaknesses, including and empower participants. Okay. So what were the least, those that got the least amount of examples or votes was communicating a vision. That was the least learned leadership skill through the youth program. Articulating a vision was also something that scouts don't think they have learned. Not necessarily the same thing as they haven't learned it, but at least they're not aware of having learned it. Okay. Now, we also asked, what do you want to learn? What type of leadership skills do you want to learn in scouting? Include and empower all participants. This really is a strong thing that people feel very strongly about. It's something that they do already, but also want to do. And then, communicating a vision and articulating a vision. So there is a clear gap between what scouts want to learn and have learned in terms of leadership skills. And I think it's pretty, at least have learned, is pretty consistent with this picture. Because we don't have a lot of examples on the visionary skills. Now, we didn't ask you what you wanted to learn, but I think it's speaking the same language to a large extent. And the visionary skills is very closely related to the purpose of scouting. And we won't have Edward here after the coffee break, so we talked a little bit here and said that it would be good for him to add something short just before we break for coffee. It won't take a long time, but I think it's very valuable to the discussion.
Thank you, because the coffee is there, so I'm going very fast on that. I think that visionary skills are already there. The thing is that we don't realize that they are there. So if you think about what's the purpose of scouting, we have 2 main elements. So we contribute to the self-development of young people, to be fulfilled individuals, and to be responsible citizens. As fulfilled individuals, we try to empower them, is what Dominique Bernard was saying this morning. So we give them means for them to develop. And as responsible citizens, what we give them is a code, like a group of values, which are the values of scouting, which are basic values of coexistence, and we give them capacity to make their vision of society. In each one of our associations, we don't explain kids how society should be. We empower them to be actors, to make this society be somehow. And we give them the values on how this society could be. That's why when our kids are adults, they could vote several different political parties. That doesn't matter. They have similar values and they have different views on how this is implemented. So leadership is needed for this creating a better world, because we don't create the better world as the community of scouts, but as the addition of each one of the individual scouts. And when you talk about visionary skills, you would imagine many examples. For instance, the people in Brazil that were promoting a project to take guns out of the city, a project in South Africa to decrease the spread of AIDS, a project in a little village to avoid depopulation in rural areas, a project in a big city to rebuild old buildings of people with no money. All of that are visions. The thing is that we don't think that those are visions because this is what scouting does. So we think that this is the normal thing. But the visions are there. And we realize much more the management skills, the people skills, how you put everybody together. But those visionary skills are mainly the consequence of the values that we give to the kids through the Scout Law, which are our educational goals. I think that this is important because somehow when people say, hey, tell me how to articulate a vision, somehow I have never met a scout who is not able to properly articulate a vision on how to increase, how to make each environment better. The thing is that they don't realize that this is a vision, and they don't think that this is part of the leadership process, which is what is needed to make a better world. I think that this is something that you could talk and discuss about after the break. Oh, sorry, yep.
Thank you very much, Edward. I really appreciate what you think, because you see, it's exactly what I say in our group, that visionary skills is already inside us. And I would like to ask for all of us who agree on what he said. So hands up. Okay, thank you very much. So everybody, most 70% say visionary skills is inside us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Edward. All right. It's now 6. Sorry, it's definitely not 6. It's 16, maybe, 16:40. There is coffee outside. I know that some of you have other workshops in mind after the coffee break. I do want to say that you will miss out on something, because we're getting even more practical after the coffee break. I mean, we're really getting down to so how do we do this? You know, concrete and practical. So, of course, it's your choice, but I don't know if it's a very smart one. But okay, so we'll meet here again at 5 past. So we're cutting your coffee short by 5 minutes. So 5 past 5, we'll start again in here. Getting concrete and practical.